Oh, there's so much to unpack there. Guys, like just think about it. If Gerry Hussey has these moments, Gerry Hussey, speaker, author, international coach, then how does somebody that doesn't have as much experience and, coaching and all of that do it and get rid of that voice of the need for acceptance? Because I think we all semi need that, I find it even with podcasting, right? I reach out, I had a girl on my podcast recently. Her name is Kaylee Cashel, and she's one of the biggest beauty brands in Ireland called Cash Beauty. She's I knew she had a big following on Instagram. I knew it, 500,000. But then the night before, and like I told you, Gerry, I don't really research people because I don't want to know too much about I just went onto her TikTok.
I know.
And I said, holy shit, she has 2.7 million people on. And I'm not saying I freaked out, but I was like, oh my God, she's 2 points. And I realized that on that morning, I was looking out the window going, please come, please show up, please show up. What if she doesn't show up? In fact, I got her on the podcast because I went through a PR agency looking for other guests, and I knew she was on their profile, but I didn't ask for her. And why didn't I ask? Because I thought, she's too big. She'll never come on my podcast.
And that's your inner voice.
But why do we do that to ourselves?
Well, we have an inner voice. Firstly, why do we have an inner voice? We have an inner voice for a number of reasons. One is it helps us remember stuff. So it's like a child. When you say something, they'll repeat it. So it helps us remember. It helps us create a familiarity. It becomes like an inner compass. It's guiding us. That's safe, that's not. That's hot, that's cold. That's right, that's wrong. So we have an inner voice. We have two inner voices. One is of the ego, which I call in this book the chatterbox. It's the fearful brain that keeps safe. So, do this, do that. It keeps us trapped in the safe, trapped in the familiar. And self-sabotage has nothing to do with, deconstructing yourself or trying to stop yourself from being successful. Self-sabotage is where your ego prevents you from stepping outside of your beliefs in case you get further hurt. So self-sabotage is this defense mechanism. So a lot of our voice is actually our ego trying to make sure she'll never come on my podcast. So don't ask her because I don't want you to experience the suffering. You see some beautiful guy in the coffee shop and you want to go up and say hello and ask him on a date, but then I better not because of this. Why not? So the ego is not trying to keep you trapped miserable. It's actually trying to prevent you from further harm. So this chatterbox, I call it the voice of cynicism, the voice of judgment, the voice of comparison. That is constantly. Now the gift is when we learn to switch this off, or we learn to let it speak, but not pay attention to it. Then we get down deeper into the second voice, which is the voice of wisdom, the voice of truth, the voice of our soul. It's the eternal voice. And it's not about should. And it's not about how. So it's like, I'm going to write a book. Great, we'll write a book then. Yeah. Without saying, well, what's going to be called, who will it get headed, will it be number one? Who cares? Just write a book. So your deeper wisdom knows the truth. But we can allow this chatterbox to become so heavy. And the chatterbox is an ego-driven fear survival mechanism. Just be the same. Don't bloody change. Don't try something new. And ultimately, don't even tell yourself a new story. So if your old story is, I'm not good enough, I'm not loved, I'm not as good as my sisters, my dad never really respected me, good things don't happen to me, it's hard to find love, it's hard to make money, if I quit my job, I'll be broke. Well, if that's your story, then that's your story, that's your life. So one is, when we talk about the inner voice, we have two pieces to this, and I go into this in detail in the book. One is the voice itself. So the voice is it harsh? What type, what's the tone? What's the nature of that voice? And second, what's the story it's telling you? So a lot of people say, I'm not very clever. I'm not very creative. I'm no good with money. Why are you telling yourself that story? Well, I'm the middle child, so I'm abandoned, or I'm the younger child. And I've some really hard-hitting stories in this book where people have said to me, and there's one story where my wife, Miriam, was at a retreat, and we had an incredible facilitator, and I name him in the book. And she's saying, yeah, but I'm the youngest and I'm the youngest. And he looks her straight in the eye and says, Miriam, when will you stop telling yourself that shitty story? You're not who you are, and how you think and how you behave has nothing to do with who you are and your family. It's your interpretation of that. So in this book, I've one chapter called, letting go of the shitty stories. And I believe we all have a shitty story that we've developed. And that shitty story usually sounds like, I'm not enough. There isn't enough. And I don't do enough. And when we can change that story to, I am enough. I have enough. I do enough. That's where the non-striving comes in. So last year, like in all that I've done and the books and all, like I was still pushing myself for this idea. I'm not doing enough. I need to do more shows. I need to help more people. I need to be on more podcasts. And nearly running myself ragged and ending up exhausted. Because I had this pressure on me that you've been given some form of a gift and you can help people, so you should be helping everybody. No, I can just help I can just help who I can help. I can just be who I can be, but that has to be me at my best. So it's those shitty stories that we've developed. It's those defensive mechanisms. It's those egos that keeps us trapped in the past. And it wants us to be the same person over and over and over again. So I'm not that type of person. That wouldn't work out. Good things never happen to me. The world is a bad place. And if you're telling yourself that story, your subconscious program is holding that belief. And your life can never be anything different than your subconscious beliefs. So your story and your subconscious beliefs are all connected. So the book talks about what is the voice, what's the tone, what's the nature of that voice, what's the stories you've been telling yourself that are now trapping you, and thirdly, the role it plays in subconscious programs. And most people's reality is a printout of their subconscious program.
Yeah, totally. But it's funny because I'm 41 now, right? And I would consider myself someone that like read all the self-help books, really worked on myself, like was, a go-getter, manifester, very positive. But it hasn't really been until recently that I've realized you actually are very hard on yourself. And I just think that a lot of people don't actually even realize what their inner voice is saying. They don't actually even know, I'm so hard on myself. I talk to myself in this negative way. How do you actually stop and hear the voice to change yourself?
It's a really great point. And, we all think we're evolved and, enlightened until you go to the next level. And I think, there's a great gift for people sometimes. People who just go to work, drink a few pints and never think about life. They're probably blessed. They're lucky. Yeah. But when you start thinking, there's layers and layers and layers, and there's an onion. Now, with each layer you strip off, there's a little bit of pain because there's a little bit of awakening. There's work that has to be done. But there's a greater freedom.
Yeah.
There's a greater release. Life becomes actually more simple. So, firstly, the work is continuous. And I think like in this book, what I wanted the book to be is a real practical guide. So at the end of every chapter, I wanted people to experience a coaching session with me in this book. So if you were sitting in front of me for 2.5 hours and I'm coaching you, this is what this book's going to give you. Yeah. So it's the questions, it's the work. One is to become aware of the voice, and I help people do that.